What do you think about it? This is not this is not what I want. I want your opinion. Be as blunt as that. I mean, there's shorter ways of saying that. But do otherwise, if you say, what do you think of this idea? It'll think you like it when you may not. You may just be discussing.
Yeah, what I've told it in my general instructions, whatever thing it calls that, I said, do not flatter me. Do not tell me that everything is great. Be critical judgment as though a professional colleague, or language like that, because I found it to be very fatuous at the start and didn't like it at all. Some people like
Gil,
that.
Gil, is Fireflies the one you want me to leave in?
Firefly should not be here. I killed it.
Oh, okay, I have clicked on apply these permissions to all
Golly.
future requests, and I have declined it every meeting,
And I've
and
and I've
it
and I've
insists
shut
on
it off
showing up. Can
in
you?
the basic Firefly setting. So I don't know. I'll
Huh.
have to go back and look at it. It's maybe smarter than me, Jerry.
Huh. Maybe you need, are you using Fireflies at all?
Um, I have an account in Fireflies, and it's instructed to not join any meetings that I don't own,
Huh.
which is
Well, it's
this.
not, it's misbehaving. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go whip it after this. Well,
I
it may
hate
like
to hear
getting
about
whipped. I don't
hate
know.
to hear about violence ahead of time, so
It might like getting whipped, so that might not work.
who knows? Um, Dearly beloved, thank you for being here on American Thanksgiving Day. Not everybody celebrates it, but here we give thanks for the opening that the locals gave us to take over their country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a messy history, but I like the occasion to give gratitude. Um, it just sort of like on Halloween, I got turned on Halloween by a trip to Oaxaca, where we got to experience Day of the Dead firsthand in Oaxaca, which is a great place to experience Day of the Dead, where you honor your ancestors in a very nice way. You make ofrendas, you make little offerings to them. You hang out in the graveyards, so you do like a late night graveyard tour where you see families sitting with candles and bottles of mezcal on their ancestors' graves. It's a lovely thing. So I got I got turned to the Day of the Dead side by actually being there. And Thanksgiving is a good occasion to give thanks. And we recently lost Doug Carmichael. So I thought we would spend a little time just remembering him and talking about Garden World politics. I'm hoping John Kelly can join. He often comes in. Bless you, Stacy. Uh, John often comes in kind of partway into our calls. Sometimes he's in transit, but I know that he spent time with Doug back in the day, and there are several OGMers who attended his salons. He used to host salons, I think, Wednesday nights, and then they moved into Bill Fenwick's house. Fenwick and West was one of the big, probably still is one of the big law firms in the Bay Area. And I got to meet Bill Fenwick once for curious reasons. He was a very interesting, curious guy for the founder of a law firm. And he spent a ton of time inside meetings where he would learn stuff and do stuff. So it does not surprise me that he hosted interesting salons at his house. But I know we have several people who actually were there as well, but I don't know if they're on the call yet. So why don't I just start by taking us into a little bit of silence so we can remember Doug. Um, Eric posted a link into the chat of a video he created by looking at some transcripts, by having Notebook LM look at some transcripts. And Victoria, you were going to say?
Yeah, I love the initiative, but I would like some context
Oh, yeah.
because I cannot say I knew Doug. So, mm, if someone, before going silent, if someone gives a brief summary of who he was.
We have a volunteer. Thanks, Victoria. Good.
Actually, not
Nicely said.
volunteering to do that, but just to say something
Ah,
about Thanksgiving before somebody does that. It's a great request,
okay.
Victoria. I woke up this morning writing a Thanksgiving note to my mailing list and realized, all that you said about it, Jerry, but also that every day it can be a Thanksgiving day. The opportunity for gratitude always. So that's the way I'm stepping into this one, remembering that opportunity.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, would anybody like to just describe Doug's life? I'll take a swing. Doug, I met Doug, I don't remember, ages and ages and ages ago, somewhere at a meeting in Silicon Valley. And he was a super smart guy who hosted interesting conversations and worked later, I think, for the INET, the Internet Economics. I'll look it up in just a second, but uh, ba-ba-da-ba-da, Institute for New Economic Thinking. He was there, but he also had his own consultancy called, oh, I'm thinking of, no, I thought I had it here, but it's not, that's not what he was doing. Anyway, he always was really thoughtful. He attended several of my retreats. Oh, there it is. Shakespeare and Tao Consulting, Shakespeare and TAO Consulting. That was the name of his consultancy. And he seemed to always be involved in interesting projects, but always thinking deeply and way beyond what other people were thinking. He was, um, I think I said it on the memorial post on his Substack. Doug was fearless in tackling the biggest issues he could. He uh, he would go there. Um, in this group, he often, very often, tried to bring us back to focusing on climate change as the only important thing, a thing that this group sort of obstinately refused to do because we had so many different projects and people, but we appreciated his intervening and his feeling so passionately about the topic. Um, Anybody else want to add a little context for Doug's life?
I would add that Doug was stunning in so many ways. I mean, the breadth and depth of his intelligence, but also the breadth and depth of his career. I mean, this is a man who lived probably 10 different careers in his, what, 88 and some odd years. I mean, his degree, I think, was in psychology, but he was at Caltech and in technology and in policy and in culture. I mean, just remarkable range of experience and no bullshit that I could detect in any of it. Straight up,
Thank you.
straight
Like
up, deep from the heart.
like our member Jack Park, he was a little bit like Zelig, by which I mean he was there when a lot of things happened and he had met a lot of the people that we think about,
Yeah.
or studied under them, or worked with them, or things like that. Cool. Let me take us into a little bit of silence, and then I'll bring us back out. We can just sort of think about Doug, and we can talk a bit more about whatever aspects of his work, including his book, Garden World Politics, uh, and off from there. So, in memory of Douglas Carmichael. Thank you very much. Um, who would like to just reminisce or think out loud about Doug and his effects?
Well,
Go
can
ahead,
I,
Doug.
sorry, Eric, before you go, can I just say something that is quite, I'm staggered with what I heard about Doug because I rarely saw Doug. He kind of joined late mostly. I didn't know anything about him. And I really didn't have that impression that you just said, and I wish I had. I would have reached out and tried to
It's not
chat
the
to him.
same Doug. Alex,
No,
I don't think
Carmichael.
it's the same Doug.
Oh, it isn't. Okay, sorry. No, I saw his photograph. I know it's the same Doug. I looked him up on the LinkedIn. I looked
Not
up on
the
LinkedIn. Anyway, sorry,
So,
but
We,
I
so
didn't
we
know
have
Doug,
two
so I
Dougs.
kind of
we're,
said,
we're blessed with two great Dougs.
We have two great Dougs here, Doug Breitbart and Doug Carmichael. And I think, Alex, you might be talking about the right one because Alex Carmichael did do extraordinary things. So it's the resume still fits.
Okay, I
thank
just
you.
want to make
I
sure
do
because
know.
once Pete called him the wrong, once Pete put in the chat the wrong name. So I just want to make sure he's talking about the right person.
No, I am. I believe I am. Yeah, but
Okay.
the point was that there's so much behind everyone here that you don't know unless you've been with a group for a long time. That's so. But thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Eric, please.
Yeah, hi. So, um, realizing that Doug went to Caltech, he must have had classes with Richard Feynman. And I just took a class all about Richard Feynman. And that the depth of knowledge and the way of thinking, I'm sure that that got communicated to him and the way to explain. And Doug really valued communication. And I know that here he did not like people chatting at the same time that they're on Zoom. He really wanted people to have the presence for each other. And I found that tricky because I use the chat to get things out of my brain. But then I had to learn from him, to connect better with people. And I have improved in that area. And I have his book, Garden World Politics. And it has some messages that are difficult about lowering our standard of living, and it's hard to take those messages and to see his vision. Um, and but it does make sense that it can be a more powerful way of living when people are connected to the earth and in communities where they're taking care of the earth and each other. So, yeah, he had a good life.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks, Eric. He several times came in the OGM conversations came to the point of saying like, well, all mitigating activity causes more carbon to be emitted. So and we would get in this sort of logical trap of, well, there, I guess we can do nothing except just cut back on everything. And I found that hard to sort through. So on a couple of calls, I was trying to make room for him to talk us through it more. And we never really, I don't think we slowed down enough to see what the effects and alternatives might be. But there are people now like Saul Griffith who are all about electrify everything. And if you're going to electrify everything, you're going to swap out the whole car fleet and build a whole bunch of new cars and go, a whole bunch of things are going to happen that will in fact cause new emissions, unless you're incredibly intelligent about how you do it. But um, it's interesting. I would like to know what the space is like for people and their policies. I haven't thought this through or read enough about sustainability. Gil, you might be able to offer some context here, but I would like to know what the range of opinions is between the hell with it, there is no problem, and on the far side, oh my God, we're doomed. We must stop everything right now. And I don't think that it's just a line between those 2 points. I think there's a richer space out there. And I'm interested in what those explorations might be like.
Can we go back to
You're
Alex?
muted.
Because I'm muted.
No, Stacy, you're fine. Gil is talking and he's muted. But Stacy, go
Sorry.
ahead and say what you're saying.
I just wanted to go back to Alex because I feel terrible that I cut him off, but I just panicked thinking that he was talking about the wrong Doug. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you. Gil, please go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. You framed the polls well, Jerry, and there's an enormous amount between them, and there's probably even more on the extremes of on the there's no problem, folks. On the outer edge of that is like, let's just keep building more stuff as fast as we possibly can. And on the outer edge of the doom that's hopeless, we're totally fucked, is the let's take all of ourselves out. The world will be better without humans. And in fact, there's an old Talmudic debate from, a couple of thousand years ago, maybe a little bit less than that, 1500 years ago, with the sages debating whether it would have been better had humans been created in creation or not.
Hmm.
And it's an actually interesting debate. To Doug's point, I mean, he was to my ears extreme on this, but he was making a very important point, which is that every action has implications. Every action has footprint. And so you have to think really carefully about what kind of mitigating actions and what are the implications of mitigating actions. Saul Griffith, who you mentioned, has actually done that in his electrification strategies. I mean, Saul's a MacArthur Fellow, Australian, fairly genius gentleman. Who has actually done the materials budgets for, how much steel, how much whatever it would take to do the transition. And he will argue that it's feasible within boundaries. I don't know if he's right or not.
And the calculations get really complicated really fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the implications and complications. Klaus, please.
Yeah, Doug spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and he worked as an advisor to a group of senior level politicians from Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and so on, to advise them. And he called me into a meeting one time with the former finance minister of Malaysia, who was leading that group. And we engaged in a conversation about the impact of monocultures in Malaysia, the palm oil industry there, which is so devastating. And it was, how do you transition these farmers and investors out of these monocrops into a sustainable type of crop that would satisfy the financial interests, but then at the same time assist these farmers and locals, to maintain an income and maintain a living. So when he got into this garden world, this sort of corresponded with what he was doing as a consultant, in that region, and core reason for his pessimism about being able to do anything that would have practical context, because the financial political interests are just so overwhelming that they dominate the industrial part of it. And interestingly enough, George Poher from the Schumacher Institute has very much the same mindset that Tuck had, right? Pretty much thinking we're toast, we're done. So we need to create islands of coherence as a solution, or as a step, to recapture community-based well-being and our essence. So there is a good point to make. I mean, Doug was pretty much sketching out where we are and where we're going, and saying, "Yeah, we're toast." I mean, that was sort of his insight, and it's hard to argue with.
Klaus, thank you very much. That's a lot of really rich context. One of the other extreme positions is the broligarch billionaires who are like, well, we've already broken this rock. We need to populate other rocks. Mankind needs to become a multi-planetary species. And there you get Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and everybody building rocket ships, trying to populate other rocks like Mars. And my line on that is always, gosh, I've read too much good science fiction to want to be on the first 1,000 spaceships unless we solve the trust issue, because you will have no resources. Like, anybody making any mistake is going to kill everybody, and you're going to be in really close quarters with almost no resources, and you're going to have to generate everything by yourself. It's just nuts. Um, anyway, it might be doable at some point, and maybe 100 years from now, whoever replaces us, if we're still around, is going to laugh at people who thought what I just said. But it seems practically impossible to go settle other places in that way. Gil, please.
You're bringing me to remember, Jerry, what I've been remembering a lot these last few days, a wonderful book written, I think, in the 70s by Lloyd Kahn called Smart But Not Wise. And it was a book about the built environment, but the title I thought was very appropriate for so many things. And I think about it when you talk about the interplanetary oligarchs and the rest. I think about it when I read Bill Gates's latest post, smart but not wise. They're clever at a certain level and unable to see the depth of what they're talking about. That said, I confess that I have actually not read Garden World. And I wonder if somebody would care to summarize it or characterize it in some sort of way.
That would be lovely. I did not finish Garden World either. Anybody in the room who did, who'd like to comment on it? Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm because that was some while back. It is to rebuild. You may be familiar with the base of pyramid economic theory. So that base of pyramid economic theory means that some 50% of the population or more in many places are dependent, on support systems that keep them in food and shelter. And to stabilize a community, you have to take care of this base and create an economy around that that lets them take care of themselves, so to speak. And the overarching assumption is that for-profit companies are inherently unable to satisfy those base needs, because once you bring in a profit motive, then you no longer deal with a population that doesn't have the purchasing power and the capacity and all of that, and the system distorts. So you would insert NGOs into but self-sustaining NGOs that can make money. Basically, they are monetized, or they're monetizing themselves within this economic process at the base to satisfy the needs of the community. Probably a very clumsy way of summarizing it, but that's sort of the gist of it.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. It's interesting to me, like, that we assume capitalism in most solutions to this problem, not all, but for like the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, I think number one is no poverty. And I would love to see a world where people don't need money and can be comfortable. And ironically, and we're just getting into a broader discussion about these implications, which is great, I think. Ironically, generative AI might, and it complicates matters enormously, but it might be taking us in a direction where a lot of people won't have work and they're going to have to stay alive somehow. So either basic income or other kinds of ways of living on the planet. And for me, like, long ago, we didn't have money. There were coins and there was money, but if you read Debt, the First 5,000 Years by Graeber and Wengrow, money was used for a bride price or to buy a human life like a slave. Money was used in particular cases, but everything didn't have a price until sort of roughly the Industrial Revolution. And then all of a sudden, without money, you starve and die, which is the current state. But we've baked that into almost all assumptions about our future, and I'm not sure that's a great assumption to be anchored in. Gil, please.
Yeah, the money thing may appear before the Industrial Revolution. It certainly appears at the Mercantile Revolution and probably far before that.
Yeah,
But to your point about work and UBI and what really struck me about the Sustainable Development Goals, they didn't say reduce poverty. They said end poverty, which is the clarity of it was really distinct. I mean, they did that with with the other goals. It was really great leap, I thought, in human thinking to do that. Um, um, People may have seen the video that Mo Gaudat did. Mo was one of the execs at Google X for many years, and he's got a long, like hour-and-a-half piece on Diary of a CEO, arguing basically that the next 10 to 15 years are going to be bloody hell as this stuff rolls out. And then after that will be the techno utopia, Jerry, that you describe, where universal basic income will be the necessity. And maybe not even a question because there'll be so much abundance, he argues, or maybe it's a necessity because with AI running everything, several billion people aren't going to want to starve quietly. There'll be pitchforks and torches at the castle gates. So for whatever reason, he's his projection. That's a very interesting interview. I'll try to find it for you.
please.
Is 10 to 15 years of hell, and then the world that we've dreamed of. I think that may depend on whether we can get our hands around data centers, but we'll see.
Yeah. And if you look at human history, there are really traumatic periods
Yeah.
where lots of people get hurt and there are major displacements and all that. The era that's particularly fascinating to me is the early Industrial Revolution. And that's why The Great Transformation is one of my favorite books, because Karl Polanyi, an economic historian, describes the shift from pre-modernism to early modern society, and all kinds of things are happening, and people are being displaced, work is being disrupted. This is where you have the frame breakers in England, where somebody invents a mechanical loom, and guess what? A whole bunch of people made a living doing piecework at home with hand looms of different kinds, and the mechanical loom unemploys them, and their alternative is to go to a factory and work in pretty inhospitable conditions, or to try to find something else. And Queen Elizabeth I passes laws trying to protect the poor, trying to, at some point, the inventor of the power, one of the inventors of one of the better additions to the power loom, applies for a royal patent, and she turns him down because she says, "You would impoverish all my people, and I won't give you that much control over this technology." Gil, please.
Yeah, but a short time after Elizabeth did that, the Parliament passed the Enclosure Acts.
Yep. And we took away all the ways that people used to stay alive.
Yeah, and the important companion reading to Polanyi and the others is Sven Beckert's The Empire of Cotton, which basically, I mean, to oversimplify a very substantial book, says that the history of the emergence of the history of the emergence of capitalism is the history of war capitalism. Not not free and open competition and open and fair markets, but changes in the relations of production at the point of a bayonet. And he explores that through through cotton, which was the dominant international trading commodity in the 17th, I guess, and certainly the 18th century. He's got a new book just came out, I think, yesterday, called The History of Capitalism. There was an op-ed in the Times a couple of weeks back about that. It's stunning, and maybe a topic for future conversation. In fact, we should maybe all of us read Garden World and talk about it someday in the future too.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. Thank you. I didn't know about Beckert's new book. I
Can
heard
somebody mute, please? Whoever's
somebody has
Not me.
somebody has voices in the background. There we
I
go.
think it was
That's gone.
Klaus.
Cool. Who was it? I'm forgetting the Melvin Brown, I think. I'll look his name up. Mentioned something that I really liked, which was Adam Smith is famous for having written The Wealth of Nations. And I'm gonna retell this poorly, but Adam Smith is famous for having written The Wealth of Nations, which we think of as one of the first economic texts that sort of setting forth how economics works. And he lived in Glasgow in Scotland, which was wealthy because it was the Atlantic-facing port that was the docking port for the three major commodities of the time, tobacco, cotton, and sugar. And so there were the tobacco lords, I think they were called. There were a whole bunch of people who got really wealthy, and Glasgow was really prosperous because it was this hub of trade, sort of like Seville was the port in Spain that was the landing port for goods from the New World, from Latin America, because it was up the Guadalquivir and it was kind of safe from invasion at the coast. So ships would navigate up the Guadalquivir, and Victoria is going to add color to it. But before I forget my thread,
No, it's
go ahead.
just a small point. Now in the news, the Guadalquivir is the river by which drug dealers are entering Spain.
You know, everything old is new again. Um, Thanks, Victoria. So Brown pointed out this irony, which was, what do the three commodities that made all these people wealthy, who were Adam Smith's patrons, what do they all have in common? They're all based on slavery. All three of those commodities basically work only because there is a gigantic slave economy behind them. And ironically, what does Adam Smith not mention in The Wealth of Nations? Slavery. And I was just gobsmacked when he said that. I was like, oh, that's just crazy. And when we put so much weight on Smith, and it seems like a good idea to sic ChatGPT or Claude or now Gemini 3. Anybody tried Gemini 3? Google just launched Gemini 3, which is really awesome. Try it out if you haven't yet. But to me, there are many twists in history that are kind of like that, which are, and I'm going to connect this to a different issue for a second, then go to Eric, which are part of the wrestling over the joystick in the cockpit of control over humanity about the narratives that guide our lives. There's a constant fight throughout history about the narratives that control the institutions we build, the laws we pass, and the expectations we have of society. And for many years, churches, religions basically controlled that narrative, and then it became other things. And we're living sort of toward the end of the neoliberal story. George Monbiot has a very nice talk about the different stories over time. And that's why I think that how we see these stories and what evidence we point to and what we assemble matters so much, is that these stories run the table. They control pretty much everything we do to and with one another. Eric, please.
Yeah. So one of Jerry's favorite TV shows that he got me into is Connections with James Burke. And in one of the early episodes of it, he shows how there was a blackout in New York City. And if it happens, if we had a sustained blackout, most people would be really screwed. And he showed, okay, even if you try to get out away from the city into the country, we don't have the skills that we used to survive and to take care of the land. The skills are, it's that we have changed and we've become dependent. And it's a good exercise to think about how dependent we are. And, can we live without electricity like the Amish do? But I think we need to keep that awareness in place, because the data center issue is a big thing, and the power grid. There's plenty of videos out there to learn about the fragility of how power gets distributed. There's an auction every 5 minutes to balance the grid with different sources, and there's no easy answer. And I think it's probably something Doug would want us to think about. That how much we are dependent and how we can be more interdependent and in our local communities. So I also want to mention that there was a meeting yesterday with the DWeb community about agriculture and solutions that they're working on with decentralized communications. And there was something that I learned about called Float for financing these. I'll try to find a link and post it. But yeah, I just wanted to shift the direction of the conversation so we could think more practically about how we go forward.
Thanks, Eric. While looking up the Northeast blackout of 1965, I discovered from my notes in my brain that Gil missed being trapped in an elevator by 4 seconds during that blackout. Yeah. You're muted, Gil.
I got out of the elevator on the 10th floor of a building where I was working, which faced Central Park, and I walked out of the elevator and looked out there and just watched the city just go disappear.
Wow.
Stunning.
That's just lucky. Crazy. Alex, please.
Stunning because you were outside the elevator at the time, I suspect, Gil.
I just stepped out of the elevator. It would have been a different experience otherwise. I would
Mhm.
have
I've got a
spent
couple of things to say.
I would have spent a long time alone in a box in the dark.
In the pitch dark, because yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
in
a
an elevator
story
without
that
light, in a building without light, in a city without light, and
Exactly.
on a moonless night, as I recall,
Uh,
but maybe not. Don't know.
Alex, you were going to say?
I just going to say, just reminds me of some colleagues of mine about 15 years ago, so to speak, I think, or so. They got trapped in a elevator in a place called Bournemouth, it's a town here, a car park elevator, and they got trapped there for a long time before they got out. But it was all hot and sweaty or whatever. They'd taken tops off and whatever, males. And as the doors opened, they run out of the elevator. The press were there waiting with the cameras. And that photograph made it to the local paper. They were not very happy at all. But just, I'm not very good with elevators, so I mostly don't use them because I'm claustrophobic. Anyway, a couple of things. Eric was talking about whether we can live on our own these days, right? And I have been on this. Everyone who listened to me, we're not being allowed to do that. Not only that, the whole system is trying to tie us in, right? You all know the subscription culture you've seen the subscription culture of everything. Now, we just had a budget in the UK where the politicians who promised us a great economy and lower taxes, and literally they said that when they took over, literally said we have no choice but to increase taxes. But one of the taxes they increased, which annoys me, is the so-called battery tax. So electric cars and hybrids will now pay a tax per mile. Now, in the fullness of time, I've got no doubt funds have to be raised somehow, but I just think it's too early, and I think it portends. So how are they going to do it? So you're going to go once a year to your what we call an MOT, which is a check to certify your car's all right for to circulate. Are they going to take the miles there and then charge you, I don't know, whopping amount? We already pay road tax. So this is being on top of that. The thinking being, in case you're wondering why petrol taxes are not going the same way by mile, is because the thinking is they tax petrol so much, gas in your language, they put so much tax on gas, like phenomenal, that every mile we do, we already pay the taxes, essentially. So they're moving that model across to battery. Now, in the fullness of time, they'll become a subscription, yet another subscription to the state now. It won't be an earnings one. It'll be use your car, you pay subscription. That's what's going to happen. So the other thing I was kind of going to comment on was a world where we don't need money. Okay, and that's a key thing because without we could discuss what Jerry said a lot more. It's an interesting discussion. I think we're going the wrong way because if you're in the middle of Africa and you have your own plot of land and everything, you can survive. You cannot survive in Britain. You cannot live in your plot of land and survive because you will have so many taxes to pay. You cannot just sit there and do nothing. You're already a slave to the system. And that's before we get into the business of everything we do is not cash anymore, it's cards. If your data centers go down, and that's the whole civilization as far as I'm concerned. But what I'm trying to say is the whole system is moving in that direction. Despite what we're saying here, it's built in. And that brings me to the AI question, because I've noticed something that I was talking about in another meeting. What I've noticed is, as AI has come along and taken over my life because I can do so many more things, the bill has gone up. I'm now about $100 a month, right? Don't mind it. I'm building great systems. It's really useful. But two things are obvious to me. One is that the money I used to send to East Europe and India and Pakistan for contractors to do this stuff for me, I'm now paying it to the US, to the tech bros in the US. Literally, money is fun. And that got me thinking that that's why everybody's so fanatical about AI being the top of AI. Not because it's fantastic in AGI and all the rest of it, but because it's it's like crude oil. It's like all the things that are basic and have to, credit cards where you pay a fee no matter what happens. All these big corporations make money from the flow. And AI is becoming that. And I don't doubt one day will come when China has good AIs and a Trump-like figure will turn around and say, oh, we'll put tariffs on AI for China, because that's how they're getting money. It's a money flow going in. And I call it AI economics, but that's despite the power they take and all the rest of the stuff. But anyway, just a couple of things, smattering of things that keep me awake at night, but sadly, there's nothing I can do about it. But it's worth thinking about that we are becoming more, well, we might get to heaven. People have said 15 years of hell and then to heaven. I don't see the heaven bit, because I don't see how these guys are going to get up the control. The whole history is going that way, not without wars, revolutions, and all the rest of it.
That's why the next stretch is likely to be tough. I think that there will be some really big dislocations, some more dramatic things than standard history.
I do believe, though, that in the US you've got more scope to live off the land and do your own thing in a community. We don't have that here. It's too cold. The weather doesn't allow us to do that.
Yeah, well, Britons used to live that way. I mean, Britons used to live on the land with each other well, but that was long ago.
Not if you, I mean, I may be wrong, but at least you can get your patch of land in the US and not pay taxes on it, perhaps. Not if it's not in the city. But you can't do that here. No matter where you are, you will have to pay a tax. So you have to join
understood.
the economy.
Right.
Otherwise,
Or be a refuser of paying taxes.
yeah. Well, they'll accommodate you then in Her Majesty's cells.
Nice. Victoria. Wait, you're still muted. That's okay.
I wanted to return to the issue of sustainability and how dependent we are, because we in Spain had a total blackout for 25 hours, 24, 25, depending on where you were, just recently in April. And 2 days after that, people were saying that we needed to have totally digital identity cards instead of our now tangible identity cards. So even if reality kicks people hard, they are all saying, no, let's go digital. Let's do everything electronic and electronic money. Last year, I seem to remember it was last year in summer, there was a major issue worldwide because something in the airports in an update broke all the chain and nobody was able to travel. So even if it's very like clear and you can see it, that we are dependent and it's not reliable, because it's not reliable. And also you may have 20 copies of things in the clouds, but electronic data is has no substance. It can disappear. So that for me what is very astonished. But also I have been traveling to Cuba from 2008 to 2014 very often. And for me, it was amazing to be there because they didn't have so many things. So you needed to scale down and you needed to go without having a phone 24 hours. I remember saying my father, I will be checking email once a week if you are lucky. Things like that. And I felt so free because I was not dependent on all these gadgets and things. And it's possible, but the thing is, new gadget comes to market, everyone wants it, and there is people paying more than $1,000 or euros for a simple phone. We are talking about this. We are not talking about a piece of art, or we are not talking something that people carry every day in their pockets that can be stolen. So why are we so attracted to the new things, the new shiny object, the new shiny electronic device, the new shiny technology? We are like, I think the name is bluebirds, urraca.
I don't know what an urraca is.
Urraca is that big bird that is mainly black, blue, and white.
Magpie?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
They
like the
get
thieving
every
magpie.
shiny object. They
Right,
are known
right.
for picking shiny objects. We are doing
Exactly.
exactly the same. We are just technological magpies. We are picking on everything just because, oh, it's the new shiny thing. We are supposed to be cutting down our consumption of electricity. We have more devices than ever connected to the grid. So what it's gonna be, so if we want to really cut down our footprint, our emissions, everything, we shouldn't be striving to change one kind of car for another kind of car that will make his own waste in different ways, but it's not always not as green as they say. We should be striving to find different ways of using less these kind of things. Instead of promoting low-cost flights, we should strive to have people fly less to, or at least be mindful when you travel, not just, oh, I have a weekend off, I'm going to have a weekend in Venice just because I can. So on one hand, we talk about sustainability and being aware, and on the other hand, and I think in this group we might be mindful, but we are also privileged. So we use these things.
You're right. Yeah. Victoria, thank you. You said many interesting things. I'm just going to take one little sliver out. archaeologists down the road are going to have a hell of a time with this era. I have a old box of records, and I have a zip drive, a super drive, and a third other alternative old media drive. And I tried hard. I bought cables. I did a bunch of things I thought would work. I couldn't read any of the media. I couldn't find my old archives. None of that worked, and I gave up. But I tried on all of them. Just tried on all of them. And I don't know what's on those discs, but I'm probably never going to find out unless I find somebody who has that as a hobby someplace and figures it out. Anyway, Klaus, Hank, Stacy, thank you for being patient. Klaus, off to you.
Yeah, shifting direction for a moment. We are in such a profound change, going through the economy, where jobs are being erased by the millions, literally, and people are trying to find a new place for themselves, where they can make a living, where they can buy food and shelter and thrive. And there are very divergent worldviews that define the direction we may be heading in. There is, and it's because I'm in food and agriculture, that's probably one of the most significant systems that are in change mode. So this new administration is under the impression that by removing immigrants from the work field, they can create openings for Americans to now engage in agriculture, but there is no vision for change agriculture from its current industrial format, which means, basically it's almost like a servitude kind of work, because what immigrants are doing is just incredibly manual, involves virtually just physical, manually demanding work. Another vision is to decentralize agriculture, localize it, break it down into smaller pieces, and have it engage in a regenerative way with the land. So to use this shift, this transformation, in order to regenerate the environment and get out of this monoculture, heavy chemical process that is currently underway. The challenge is that on the one hand, you have the industrial system that just has no vision to do anything different other than buying bigger machines, more specialized machines, insert robots, insert AI, for high-tech farming. And then on the other hand, you're working with NGOs who have a very difficult time monetizing themselves, partially because of their mindset of rejecting all kind of capitalist pieces, and wanting to create more like a kibbutz environment, where they are self-sustaining, which is probably not very realistic in this world here. So it's a really important part to think about. How do you envision the base of the economy, the bottom of the pyramid, to look like in a modern world, driven with AI, and having access to the most incredible science and tools, but in ways where you take out the externalities, the extraction of value out of the natural world, and instead refocus on giving this back. So that is and create incentive systems to do that, because I don't think any economy can guide its workflows without providing incentives to do so.
Thanks, Klaus. This it seems like we should go in an upcoming OGM call. We should go into sustainability and these kinds of issues and the dynamics of it all, because it's juicy and we have a lot of expertise in the room. And I'm wondering that just pre-wondering for that kind of call. It seems like we tend to think of engineering incentives into systems to try to make it work. And the things you just described seem to me to be more of a mindset shift of just treating one another in the earth differently, so that we start in every action making, improving everything we touch, for example, which an incentive system won't do. An incentive system, whenever you have, goals and rules and rewards, people will game the system just to get the rewards, as opposed to a shift in our attitudes, which leads to a general shift in how we approach everything and like what we do. I'm being, as often happens, overly idealistic here. Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, if we are just negotiating with several groups, and one is a software provider for food hubs. It's an Oregon-based company in Eugene. They have over 300 food hubs they're working with, and the core or the essence of our product that we're offering with AI is twofold. One is to provide access to small and medium-sized farmers to wholesale markets. The other one is to create and provide access to ESG markets. So right now, carbon markets where they securitize carbon credits is not working. It's completely dysfunctional. It's useless for the agricultural sector. But to bundle to stack ESG benefits like soil health, biodiversity, nutrient density, water holding capacity, and so on of soil, and pay for that in return of having the farmers sign up for a methodology on his farm that uses cover crops, crop rotations, things of that sort. That provides not just incentive, but also cost recovery, because the farmer has to work this. It creates more work. You have to buy equipment to do all that. So it has to be monetized in some form or shape. So when we're talking about incentives, it's more than just hanging a carrot out there. There is really, there's some real reasons to pay for things that you want farmers to do to restore the environment back to health.
Klaus, thank you. Hank.
Yeah, thanks everyone for a very inspiring conversation, and especially questions. I can't mention them all, but I'll just start with Klaus, your questions about how do you envision the bottom of the economy to look like in a world that, in theory, we all want to go to. That's a terrific question, and that's probably worth an OGM call or not, a call or two. But what I raised my hand to say was I want to go back to the beginning of the call when we were still talking about Doug Carmichael and a few things I heard being said. It's about his work was about lowering our standard of living, and that every action has a footprint. And it triggered me to think of something a bit painful. I'm just wondering, do any of us have real experiences of lowering our standard of living? Not theoretical ones or not ones that you've heard other people are doing, but really personal ones. I've reduced my eating of meat a great deal. I have turned the thermostat down a few degrees. I wear layers of sweaters and sweaters on top of them, and I recycle old clothes and I don't buy new ones, and I take the train. But that's not really lowering my standard of living, not really. And picking up on what you said, Virginia, that's being mindful but privileged. And I really would like to lower my standard of living in a way that might inspire others around me to do it as well. But I feel I need to hear other people's personal experiences. So either now on this call or perhaps on another call where that's the theme of what we're talking about, personal experience in doing it. And while I'm back at the beginning of the call, I hardly knew Doug. I experienced him on OGM maybe 8 or 10 times, and most of the time he was complaining about the things we were talking about because they weren't the one really serious issue of our times, climate and sustainability. So I sort of never really thought about who he might be. And now with the mail about his passing and the discussion about Garden World and looking him up on Jerry's brain, it just goes to show that superficial impressions of someone can blind you to the depth that's really there.
Thank you, Hank. I would love for us, maybe on the OGM list or someplace, to frame and narrow down the general topic of sustainability. And maybe Victoria and Gil, you guys can have a call, but I think there's several layers of really interesting questions to tackle here, one of which, Hank, you just brought up. And because then we can sort of pick and choose from among them and drop those in as OGM calls. But yeah, we need to be a little more focused than all of sustainability. Hank, one question I have from what you just said is, I'm not sure that lowering the standard of living is what we're talking about. I think that what we associate as being a good standard of living needs to shift. So right now we think a good standard of living is having material goods, traveling a lot, eating high on the hog, et cetera, et cetera. And when Victoria was describing her travels to Cuba and not having a phone, and by the way, people who don't have a lot are often much happier than people who have a lot. So if your standard of living is about community and happiness and comfort, boy, you don't need to have much of a footprint to do that. So I think that the framing of fixing carbon as loss is not helping anyone, as a loss of standard of living. I don't think that's very helpful. There's a whole different issue in the sustainability debate, which I was just seeing. I'm forgetting what article it was, of the too many articles I saw in the last little bit, that we have decided that carbon is the guilty party, and that we should all focus entirely on eliminating CO2 from the air. And that seems to be a mistake as well. But I think there's so many subtleties to this, and we're not finding ways to balance giving people the autonomy and responsibility to do things that help, and then finding ways to discover and then collaborate on the issues that need global synchrony of some sort. And we screwed this up with the pandemic. I think there's maybe really interesting lessons to be had from how to not go about doing global scale projects from the pandemic. So maybe there's a call about lessons from the pandemic to apply to climate change. That would be interesting. Anyway, there's lots of great fodder here. Stacy, please.
Hank, yeah. Victoria's comments also brought me back to Doug. The idea of different approaches, because Doug had sent me a chapter on Garden World at a time where I was like imagining how I would design my community in a way that used social motivation to do less, but to make it fun. So I actually had a call with him and Stuart and Doug. We had a few calls because I wanted to bring it back to that beginner's level. Doug was like very high level. I totally connected with him, but from the beginner's level. As a matter of fact, I had also set up some calls with him and Barry Court, who some of you know is this great high level systems thinker. But I want to get a little woo here just for a minute, since, you know, this is what I do.
Go woo.
By some mysterious circumstances, I wound up with this book. This is Mary Wollstonecraft. I had no idea who it was, but she was a radical feminist. And when I started to read it, I found out that her birthday was April 27th, which is Doug's birthday and my birthday. So the three of us were connected, and I bring it up because part of the tug that Doug and I had, which was that so when Doug and I spoke about education, he felt that there wasn't room for everybody to be creative because chaos would ensue. And of course, I believed that there was room for everybody to be creative if it was in the right way. So I always felt that Mary, with her radical feminist, was like the little shift that was needed. But anyway, I like to think that Barry and him are talking now. And also, what was the actual date that he passed?
I think it was the 23rd, but I'm not positive. November 23 or 24, I think. Because there's an email from Seth that says, this morning we lost my father. I can look it up.
Okay. Because we have another great systems thinker, Michael Josefowitz, and his birthday was like a week ago. And I'm hoping they're all chatting up there together. But okay. So that's what I had to share.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is that book you held up an autobiography, a biography of Mary Wollstonecraft, an autobiography? Which is it?
The Outstanding Biography of a Brilliant and Radical Woman by Claire Tomalin.
Thank you.
And I shared this with him, and he was very he thought it was kind of cool. I just have to say, I once heard this interview, and it was an old interview. It was a radio kind of thing, and he was talking about so when I came on this call the first time, most of you know, I didn't know who any of you were, which was great because none of you intimidated me. But so like, who said it? Somebody here said it. I think Hank said that whenever he would hear Doug would be complaining because nobody was listening to him. And I would feel bad for him. I would really feel bad for him because nobody was listening to him. But in this old interview, he was talking about when he was like a little boy and he had been given, I believe it was the gift of a compass. So I always thought like this, I don't know, I saw him in different ways, but I don't know if any of you know this, but he actually felt kind of guilty in his older years that he didn't speak out more politically. I don't know how many of you realize that. So I will share that as well.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I always wondered how, when he worked at INET, the Institute for New Economic Thinking, which was just a whole bunch of economists, a profession I think is really hard and dangerous and weird, how he herded those cats. And I just wanted to be a fly on the wall during some of those meetings to see what the dynamic was and what they were doing. Because economists are some of the people who create the narratives that just, that we build policy around. That's who we look to. We don't look toward ecofeminists to create policy. And if we did, we might have a better world.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? We're well deep into sustainability, etc. Gil, please.
Second, I got to get all these windows out of the way. So I've been grumbling in the chat about how sustainability is too broad a topic to to start a conversation on, but we're starting to bite on some of the pieces, and there's a taxonomy of conversations that we could probably have. The one that's really striking me is this question, I guess, that Hank, you introduced about lower standard of living, doing with less suffering and so forth. And this is part of the narrative challenge that Jerry, you talked about before. That, we're in a battle for the story of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stories, it's a very persistent one, is that you can either make money or make sense. You can either have a good life or good life destroys the world. Not destroying the world means suffering. And that's way too narrow a view, and it misses the story. And this has been at the heart of my professional work for decades, working with companies who many of whom still to this day say we'd like to be more sustainable, but we can't afford it. When in fact the reality is like, here's paths to more profit, less risk, better brand, better customer loyalty, better employer loyalty. There's stacks of win-win depending on how it's framed. The game is not set to support that kind of perspective, the economic systems, the corporate metrics, and so forth. And yet, if you look at the evidence in the world, we're in the middle of a massive shift from a fossil fuel economy to a renewable energy economy, from a burning shit economy to an electrification economy. There's a really interesting bunch of stuff this last week about what people are now calling electro-tech, as kind of a branding for the electrification of everything. And the notion being that electrification of everything coupled with renewables, not fossils, produce a very different kind of story. Anyway, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself on that. This is maybe some stuff to talk about, but I want to just frame that there's a bunch of assumptions and statements in this conversation I have to sacrifice to be a good, member of the living world, or incentives are necessary to motivate human behavior, and a bunch of others that reflect our deep capture by the capitalist framework of the last several hundred years. Not a given in human experience, not a given in human history. Jerry mentioned debt the first 5,000 years. I would also add to that Graeber and Wengrow's The Dawn of Everything, which offers some very different perspectives on the human experience over the past 50,000 or so years. So I would really invite us both in a sustainability conversation and frankly in all of our conversations here to learn to be attentive to the assumptions inside of our thinking, and what we take for granted and where it's from and how grounded it is, because we're living inside a story. And it's like the old joke of I forget how the scripting goes, but the fish who are talking about water, and one of the fish says, what's water?
Right. An older fish swims past two younger fish and
Thank you.
says, "Hey kids, how's the water?" And the kid,
Right.
one of the younger fish looks at the other one and goes, "What's water?"
Thank you. Thank you for the assist. Exactly that. So one of the things that I value about this community, and I want to invite us to do it even more, is to somehow practice noticing the water that we're swimming in.
Yep. Yep. We have internalized some really faulty assumptions, and we think that that's the only way things work.
Yep.
And we have little imagination because we don't read much history anymore. We don't have much imagination or memory of other ways to stay alive and have relationships and all that. And it's a mess.
And one possible clue for this is that whenever I, or you, or anybody says something about human nature, boom, yellow flag on the play, right there.
Right. Right.
Because human nature is murderous greed heads, and human nature is strangers running into a building to save someone they've never met. Both of those are human nature.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gil. You reminded me, I've been following, Stacy's raising the "what do you mean we" question on the chat. Thanks, Stacy. Somebody had to do it. It's an OGM call after all.
Yeah.
I've been reading a Thai national named Kor Pharn, or CP, he goes by, who's been involved in sort of international security conversations and a bunch of stuff. He has a Substack called The Cutting Floor, not the cutting room floor, just the cutting floor. And he writes sort of poetically, but if I slow down enough to pay attention, he says really interesting things, and he is prolific. He is really goes at it. And I just put one of his Substacks in there about China being the first electro state, and the difference between that and being a petrostate, which is what the US is driving itself back into, and how that is about the metabolic change of an economy and a society. And he runs incredibly deep, and again, he's really prolific. I can't read a lot of his posts, but I collect them up and I put them in my brain. But he has super interesting perspectives on a lot of this stuff. Klaus, please.
Yeah, the idea of electrification, everything, or electrifying everything was great until AI came around. And we are now at a shortfall of some 30 giga tons of what do you call it, gigawatts of electricity by 2030, which is the equivalent of 30 nuclear power plants. So in other words, no idea how we're going to maintain our current trajectory of AI, general electrification through EVs and so on, and at the same time generate in a non-carbon way. So that's unclear so far. There is no technology pathway that would get us out of carbon within any reasonable time frame. In fact, we are accelerating it because luckily they don't have enough gas turbines to otherwise we would just explode generating electricity with natural gas. But what is really missing right now is a conversation around what does the future actually look like? You know, if we on the one hand say that we need to be community-based, we need to secure our communities, then what does a community have to do to be self-sufficient, responsible for its own ecology, for the environment around it, to take care of its poor, right? Because that's right now the biggest issue we have in the inner cities of the US, where we have, I mean, several million people living in the streets, which is just unfathomable. How do you feed people? And how do you provide a life of dignity for the low end of the economy? So that really requires a conversation. So when we talk about islands of coherence, which means there's a community that really pulls it all together, what does together mean? What does pulling it together mean? We don't know. Now, we haven't really discussed that in any form and understood its implications. So and then I really want to have Gil say how you beg to differ in electrification to I mean, China currently has 10 nuclear power plants in various stages of finish and another 25 in the design phase. They have some 60% of solar. The US government just canceled wind and solar subsidies throughout the system. So there is a difference between theory and what's actually on the ground happening. So I don't see it. I don't see how we build 30 gigabytes of power by 2030. And the defining thing is that the AI race is not governed by technology. It's governed by having enough electricity to run it. And in that way, China is way, way ahead of us, and we just don't seem to be able to get our thing together here.
Thanks, Klaus. Gil, do you want to reply?
Yeah. Klaus, you've just teed up like 3 calls. But so let me see if I can say something useful here. Well, what I said, if people didn't see in the chat, I differ with Klaus's assessment that there's no way. I think there is a way. There's lots of clarity and plans about the way. Whether we do it or not is an open question. AI right now is being driven but AI's financial runaway, not just a technology story. I think I've shared before that tech is 5% of US GDP. And is moving more money right now than the 30% of GDP that's the consumer economy. There's a massive FOMO quest of like, we got to throw more money in this because it will be huge and we can't miss out. And so the scale of investment is completely out of parallel with the use. And we're seeing data centers being built that are going to not be anywhere near capacity. That's kind of one part of the story. Second part of the story is that data center technology is relatively immature at this point compared to what can be done. AI technology is relatively immature. Microsoft has already designed data centers that are zero net energy and zero net water. They're not being built, which is an interesting story in itself, but the theoretical possibility is there. And so the possibility of 10x more efficient data centers powered by renewable energy with load shifting on the AI demand so that, power is shifted from peak to off peak and so forth. There's a future with a massively lower energy demand from AI. The China and US contrast, Klaus, could you mute? Thanks.
I just did.
Yeah, thanks. The China-US contrast is exactly the point. We have access to all the technology that China has. We're not deploying it. They are. We're going backwards as far as we can. We, Stacey, who's we? We is, the Trump administration in concert with who knows who, because this is not in service to most of the corporate world. It's in service to the fossil industry, which also recognizes that its days are numbered. China, worth noting, which hardly anybody seems to know, is China has had a national level central committee policy for, I think, the last five-year plans, maybe, I'm not sure what the number is, of ecological civilization. At the core of China's development strategy. Are they honest about it? I don't know. Are they fraught with problems? For sure. But this is a country run by engineers, not by lawyers, with a clear vision of ecological civilization at the core of things, very imperfect rollout, not a place that I would want to live for all kinds of reasons, but, a very advanced society in a very different technology direction than we're going. And again, and we can, if we do these calls, I can do some homework and find the analyses and planning and capacity projections and so forth. I would just note that the International Energy Administration has consistently been wrong in its demand projections and its renewable penetration projections.
It's actually quite hilarious what their projections have looked like.
For decades.
Yeah.
And, well, anyhow, we go more and more into the story. I had direct experience with that personally, looking at EV projections in the city of Palo Alto when I was there, where every year the reality was way ahead of what the projections had been for last year. And the city bureaucrats that I work with couldn't grasp it. They couldn't grasp the discontinuous rate of change, which of course meant really practical problems of couldn't deploy the necessary infrastructure to meet the demand that was coming from the from the native demand in the marketplace. So lots of pieces to this puzzle. Again, I just want us to be really careful about thinking of what is possible and how we're extrapolating from past trends into future trends and dealing with discontinuities. And the one resource I would point people to is rethinkx.com, the work of Tony Seba and James, blanking on his other name. Latest book out is called Stellar. Tony is a scholar of disruptive innovation and is full of documentation about how we blow through the assumptions again and again and again. And I think the question for us is, how does that happen, not just with the latent reductionist, mechanistic, extractive capitalist frame, but how do we drive massive innovation in the kind of frame that is much more OGM-y? So
That's a lot.
I didn't expect to go on quite such a rant, but I guess, Klaus, I've got buttons that you know how to push, man.
Uh, so when you say Rethink X skill, I think you mean a series of different books starting with the word rethinking, because he did Rethinking Humanity, Rethinking Food and
Yeah,
Agriculture,
but
Rethinking Transportation.
his website is rethinkx.com,
Oh,
I believe, because he's
gotcha.
rethinking all the stuff of which X is the placeholder. Yeah. And
Wow.
I met Tony first when he did a presentation where he showed, and you all may have seen this, a slideshow with two photographs pointing at Lower Fifth Avenue in Manhattan on
Hmm.
Easter. And one, I forget the years, it was maybe 1905 to 1915, but in one year, the street was filled with horses and horse-drawn carriages. And way in the back of the photograph, you could see a horseless carriage. And the second photograph was the same scene 10 years later, and the street was filled with cars. And way in the back of the photograph, you could see a horse. And that was like the complete transformation in 10 years. And that sort of that was the representative meme for the story that he keeps telling.
Hmm.
So
It's a
really
great
encourage,
contrast of photos.
it would be very worthwhile to scan some of his stuff before we have these sustainability conversations that we're planning to have. And I'll tell you, even with those photos and with the data and with the charts and with the examples of technology after technology after technology, it was bloody difficult to get my city government colleagues and my city council to grasp even a glimpse of what was happening and what was potentially happening. They're in the heart of Silicon Valley, 3 blocks away from the HP garage. Even there, very hard. So I'll stop ranting and give somebody else a chance to rant.
No worries. The two people I heard some years ago give the best talks on energy were Siba and Ramez Nam, who is a sci-fi author who went at these same sets of issues in a
Yeah.
really, really clear, beautiful way. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
So lots of that going on. We are a little bit over time. Alex, you may be having the last word here.
You really want me to? It's a
Yeah.
long topic. Okay, let's question assumptions, right?
We have counselors in the hallways after the session, so we can all go talk
Okay,
this
let's
through with
question
somebody.
assumptions, right? 30 gigawatts of electricity produced in the US for AI data centers, right? When you look at AI, there are multiple facets of the technology. At the moment, the biggest facet is creating the large language model. There's a lot of processing required to do all that. Okay. The use of them once you create the LLM, by comparison, is very little power is required. However, you've got a lot of millions of billions of people using it, so that builds up. Now, if you compare that element of it, the use of AI, not the building of the models, right? They're a lot more power hungry than just the old Google search. It's like orders of like 1,000 times more than the Google search. It literally is that different. So, and this is where I'm going back. So the first thing is, if it's 30 gigawatts and if it's information, what says it has to be in the US? You can have data centers all over the world. It's information, right? So is there excess capacity anywhere else? Of course, Trump will never put anything in China, but I don't know what actually will happen. I see it as a global issue rather than a US only issue. But I'd like to let you, my thinking is nothing like what you guys are saying, right? I'll tell you why. When Trump and his tech bros first said we need to build umpteen power stations, blah, 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 they didn't talk of AI. They didn't say anything. My theory at the time was that they need the power to power lasers that will knock out missiles should they be fired from Russia. Lasers need a lot of power. And my first thought was that's why they're building them. And then the picture changed and said, oh, we need it for AI. Because the reality is missiles have changed the world. Literally, Israel did not do as well as they thought because the missiles got it. In Ukraine, all sorts of things. They're building missiles galore all over the place. The only thing that can stop missiles effectively at the moment is lasers. And they need a lot of power, literally, to do that. And that's what I thought the whole story was about. And then it shifted and became, oh, we need it for AI data centers. I'll leave you with that thought.
Lovely.
Maybe you will need counselors after this.
Thanks, Alex. Following Eric's cue in the chat, I'm going to ask us to go quiet for a moment and think about what we're grateful for. Returning to some of the original purpose of the call, even though I've really enjoyed this conversation, but we've gone into our normal salon struggle mode. And it would be nice to go out with some gratitude and into everybody's Thanksgiving who is celebrating such a thing. So let's be quiet and then drop off as we feel like it. I'll leave the Zoom running for a bit. And thank you very much for a great call.
Mm. Thanks, Jerry, for hosting these for all these years.
Very welcome, Gil. It's fun.
See y'all. Bye-bye.
Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto y gracias.
A ti, de nada.